Hey everyone, I am finally doing a whole video on my palette. I've been getting a million questions over on Instagram because I've been posting images of it recently, and I thought I would just film a whole video that explains all of it and says exactly where everything is from. If you are not interested in a chatty video, like, I'm sorry, that's just how I am. If you're one of my patrons, you know that I could talk forever about art supplies, but don't worry, because I have everything listed in the video description. So if you don't have time to listen to me ramble for a long time, it's all in there with links to everything I can possibly link to. So there you go. For those of you who are sticking around to watch this chatty video, grab yourself something nice and sweet to drink and pull out your art supplies and draw along with me, because it is going to be a long one. This palette is everything I have ever wanted in a watercolor palette for a very long time. If you've been following my art for a while, I went through a huge stage kind of like in the beginning of my adult art career, where I was using just watercolors, but I was very interested in snobby brands. I was all about Daniel Smith and Schminke and all this stuff, and I was very worried about, you know, how many pigments were in each paint, and I even made my own paints for a while. And I just want to say that there is zero reason to worry about all of that stuff. For a long time, I was obsessed with finding the absolute perfect things to work with. But the thing that has made me more confident as an artist and more fulfilled as an artist is just to use the art supplies that I have and not fret about going out and getting the absolute best of the best. Also, sorry if you hear my cat whining. She really wants to sit right where my tripod is, so that obviously can't happen. But yeah, there's, I think, a lot of pressure to always go out and get the newest and greatest thing, and I just feel like it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. Use what you have. If there's something that you want, make sure that you really want it before you go out and splurge. That's just my 2 cents on it. So I'm going to recommend these things. I'm going to tell you what all of this is, but don't feel the need to go out and get something if it's not something you want. There's a lot of palettes, including this one, that has all the primary colors, a cool and a warm version of each. And it always, for me, I always felt okay, to have a real watercolor palette, to have one that will help me create the most mixes and all of that, I need to have all of these things. I need to have exactly what these artists are using, and that's just not the case. There are colors that I don't use that are in this palette that I actually need to take out still. I've always kind of worried about what other people were using, and if what I wasn't using was holding me back from being a good artist. That's not true. That's not the case. Use whatever you like. Use whatever colors you like. This is judgment-free zone in here. Long-winded thing aside, here it is. Here's the color palette. First and foremost, I'm sure you could tell, but the majority of the paint is this here. It's Shinhan Pass. It's a hybrid watercolor gouache thing. Gouache is already kind of a hybrid of watercolor. It's more opaque. These colors tend to be more something that you would use out of the tube and not in a dried palette like this, because a lot of the times gouache will, when in a palette, it'll crumble, which is so annoying. Which is actually the reason why I decided to try these out in the first place, which was because I wanted gouache, but I didn't want the whole crumbly thing, and I am a mess, and I did not want to have to pull out 80 tubes of paint every single time I wanted to paint. I knew if that were the case, I would never do it. So my goal was to get a palette that had colors I like, that I could use more opaquely, but also transparently like watercolor. But not worry about that horrible, wretched, crumbly mess that gouache tends to be. So this is it. This is kind of what I'm dealing with here. So that's the majority of the paint. These tiny pans here are Shinhan watercolors, so not the hybrid gouache watercolor thing. It's just the artist grade watercolors. I got this whole set from a small business called Watercolor Hoarder. They sell artist grade paints that are in smaller quantities, or you know, like in these tiny pans, so that way you can try a whole bunch of colors without spending like $300. The last thing are these four here, which are neon watercolors from the small business Case for Making. These are handmade paints. I bought the full fluorescent set. The other ones are over here, which we'll talk about that in a little. It's expensive, but it's definitely worth it, and these paints have lasted a very long time. So the palette itself is like a cheap as hell plastic palette. I think I got it from Jackson's. It's like, it had to be under $10. They sell them at a million other stores. Like, I'm sure you can get them at Blick or wherever. It's like the cheapest folding plastic palette, so you can see like it folds close. The reason I wanted to make sure that it folds close is because I have cats. I have 3 cats and there's cat hair everywhere. So an open palette on my desk just doesn't work for me. I've tried it a million times. I've tried a million different palettes. I have gone through metal palettes, plastic, ceramic, everything. And honestly, this is the only one that I've ever like fully used a ton of, and it was the cheapest one. So I don't know what the name of it is or what company it's by. It's literally the cheapest thing. Yeah, so that's what that is. Oh, and the white, I forgot to mention, is just white gouache. This is Schminka's white, mixing white. I'm not like attached to this. It was just, you can get this in a massive tube, so that's cool with me. Now my cat is using her cat tree, so sorry about that. I did eventually run out of this, which is the white from the Shinhan Pass set. I used that. I've used there's like really cheap white, is it Arteza or something, like something from Amazon, like massive tubes. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I just will use any white, but this is the one that I'm currently using, in case you're wondering. I'm going to zoom in and we can look at the colors more thoroughly, and I will start refilling some of these pans that need more paint. This first color is actually 2 colors layered on top of each other because I didn't like the first one. The first red that was in there was this one, which is Carmine. I actually don't really care for it. It's too cool to me. So I decided to switch, and I didn't feel like peeling all that paint out of there. So I just put paint on top, and I'm running low. So you can see like there's a darker color in there and then like a brighter one on top. The one that's in there now is number 808 Bright Red. So I'm just gonna put that in that one. Okay, so then the second color, I don't actually need to refill, so I'm not going to, but it's Vermilion Hue, which is number 810. It's kind of like an orangey red. The one after that, I don't need a refill because I don't use it, and I actually want to get rid of it, but I don't feel like doing that today. So, but if you're wondering, it's Permanent Yellow Deep 815. This one is lemon yellow, and I actually used to be 817 if you're wondering. I used to hate lemon yellow. I was a like cad yellow all the way. I love like warmer yellows, but that's not really the case anymore. The reason I am into this setup where yellow and green are next to each other. It's more in like rainbow order. It's because I like to use yellow and green and mix them together. And when I mix, I tend to just go back and forth. Like here's my brush and I'll just go back and forth between the two and mix them that way without moving it over here. It's very messy, but that's what I like to do. So that's that color. And then you'll probably notice I have some paint here. This is Linden Green 821. There just wasn't enough space in the palette. If I were to redo this, I would get rid of the permanent yellow deep and I would replace it with this Linden Green because it's kind of like almost reminds me of like Nick slime, you know what I mean? This here, that small quarter pan is, I don't know how to say it, Jean Brilliant #1. Hopefully that's right. I lied, it's #2. The next one is this, which is light green. Don't let this tube fool you, it's not neon green. The one next to that is shadow green. I'm also not refilling that one. This is a color that I used to be really into when I was in my old watercolor phase, my last like style, if you can call it that. I was really into like dark muted colors and that's obviously not the case anymore. Next is Compose Blue and it is 841. These ones here, I'm sure you could see there's white at the bottom. I decided to add white there so that way when I feel like getting a pastel color out of it, I don't have to mix it in with this white, which tends to get really yucky really quick. If you have white gouache on your palette, I'm sure you know that. So that's the reason there's like a little bit of white on the ends of these three here. After that, we have Blue Gray, 842. This one is Blue Celeste, 859. It's so funny that these colors are in here because when I made this palette originally, I wasn't even into these colors, but I'm really into them now, so I'm glad that they're in there. And they're gonna mix and stuff. Like I said before, I'm not too fussed about it. There's some of this actually over here from the last time I filled. It's fine, it doesn't bother me. Sorry, this is a nightmare to you if you are the opposite of me. This one here is Green Pale. This is Emerald Green Nova, Horizon Blue. I don't really know how to say this. Verditor, I don't know, blue. This is Lavender, and then this is Blue Gray. So in the Shinhan line, in the watercolor and the pass form, there are overlaps, so some of the colors are in both types of paint. So my thought was if I have white here, this will kind of help. I can make this more pastel and this more like full charge of the color. That's my thought process. Just because I have these, I'm going to use them. Once they're gone, I probably won't repurchase. Only because I already have a lot of the same colors. It's not really necessary. The next one is number 849, Ultramarine Deep. This one is Prussian Blue, 851. So this is a color I use a lot. I'm sure you could tell by it being empty. This next one is my favorite. I have multiple tubes of it. This one's always on my desk, the tube, because I need to refill this one a lot. It's Indigo 853. This is the best indigo paint I've ever used. I've used a million different kinds. I've made my own, and this is just better than anything. So much so, for a long time, I had some here. But because I've put these neon colors here, it kind of transfers, which is not a huge deal, but I'm just not gonna put any more in this little cavity. This is Cobalt Green 827, and it goes right in this corner. It's a new addition for me. Also, I forgot to mention that because this is a plastic palette, you can't use magnets to stick these on. So I actually use double-sided tape. It is like the cheapest kind. I think I got it at like a craft store in the like $1 section, literally like 10 years ago, and I've barely used it. This is one of the only things I've used it for. But I put a little bit on. I like press this into here, and then over time, if you mix colors like me and you're really not fussed on it being super clean, all of the paint that seeps into the cracks will help it stick better. That's kind of where I'm at, but I also don't travel with this palette, so I don't know if it will hold up to like being thrown into a bag or whatever. But that's what I use, if you're wondering. I think if you were like really like set on trying to get something that was super sticky or like that will last a long time, you could probably use like super glue or something. But because I wasn't positive with how I wanted these set up, I was just kind of throwing things into here. I didn't want to do that because if I want to pull something out, I can do that. Tape comes up pretty easy. So that's the one side. That's all done. There's only the two that I would really change, which is this permanent yellow deep and this green shadow. What is it called? Shadow green, sorry. But yeah. So honestly, I have these two piles here. I probably would just replace that. So this would go here and this would go here. But at the moment, this is what I have. So this far corner with the hair on it is Heliotrope, 858. I don't need to refill this because I literally just refilled this the other day. Next to that, we have Lilac. So these are all the same. This paint and this paint. This is the watercolor, the artist grade watercolor, and this is the pass. So both of these are lilac. They have the same pigments, but this is the gouache watercolor hybrid. So these ones I have white paint in, so that way if I want a pastel version of this, I can use this. And then if I want the like full color, I use this here. It's not really necessary. These are pretty pastel as it is. But that's just, I have them and that's how I'm using them. Next is Brilliant Pink, and it's number 867. So you can see here actually that they crack, the paints do crack, but they don't crumble. They don't like come out of the pans. I've never had that happen. Again, I don't travel with it, so I don't know. The next one is Shell Pink, which is like more peachy. And the next one is my all-time favorite color. I get asked it a million times, and it's literally just called pink, number 870, but it's neon. So if you want a neon paint that is not handmade, because I know that they can be hard to come by and they're also more expensive, just get this. It's literally called pink. It's like a highlighter. This is another one, oh gross, with the indigo that I always have on my desk because I refill it so often. In fact, I just refilled it when I refilled the other ones, like this one I was talking about I just refilled. I refilled that one at the same time and it already had a crater in it. So this is a new addition because I actually had brown there for a long time. And I never once used it in this palette. And I decided to scrape it out and replace it. This is Opera 865, which is very similar. It's pretty neon, but it's more of a cool pink instead of a warm pink. And then in this corner, I have a mix of Heliotrope and Opera together. Poured a little bit of each color and then mixed it. There was no measuring or anything. Like I said, this is white designer gouache by Schminke. I tend to have multiple sections of it. So like this one, when I want to mix like a white with blue, I will mix on this side. This is more of like the warmer color. And then this is like yellows over here. But that's that. And then these are the last ones. The top one that's almost empty is Jaune Brilliant number 1. So that's the only one that I wish I had. So I would probably buy a tube of that because I do use that one. And then the other one, this is Naples Yellow. Then we're moving to these, which are the neon paints by Case for Making. I just added these in. I've had them for a while, but I just added them into this palette. So actually, I should preface, this had another mixing tray, which is this here. So it would like come out, and then when you were done with it, you could close it like this. I just brute force ripped it out, and because I wanted to add these in, and this was the only place that was like a potential, like you could put half pans in here, and they fit. I don't know if I'm gonna keep this pink here, although I love it. It's one of my favorites. I have this pink, which kind of works for that. So this one is called Fluorescent Magenta. So that's the only one I'm kind of unsure about keeping in there. Fluorescent Brick Red. This is Fluorescent Flame and Fluorescent Violet. I decided to also put the other 4 from that palette on the other mixing tray, which I'm still keeping. It's like in a drawer on my desk, so that way they're all called fluorescent whatever. So orange, light, yellow, green, and blue, easy peasy. Out of all of them, if I do take that pink out, I'm gonna replace it with the blue because that's the most helpful. Hopefully Editing Autumn did a good job of putting the color swatching in between while I was filling everything. But if not, sorry. There's a few things I do want to say is I don't know if I'm going to use this palette forever. I'm very happy with it now, but things might change, and if that happens, I will post an update video. But for now, this is what I'm feeling and what colors kind of speak to me at the moment. The other thing is these paints are not light fast. Some of them are. As a whole, I count this as my non-light fast palette, which is completely fine with me because I use this just for sketchbooks. You don't want to be using these paints, and this is true about like any fluorescent paint or fluorescent thing, like highlighters, colored pencils, like all of that stuff is not suitable for final artwork that you're selling or shown in a gallery or something like that, because it can definitely fade and most likely will. Pretty much if the color looks like there's no way it could happen in nature, it probably would fade. That's kind of like my rule of thumb. But because I mainly work in sketchbooks, or if I am making a piece with this, I'm gonna make a print out of it, I don't really give a shit. It doesn't matter, like it's going in a sketchbook. Sketchbooks stay closed for the majority of their life. So it really doesn't matter. So if you're using it for sketchbook use, great, but just be careful for like final pieces and all of that. But hopefully this was interesting and helpful. I hope this has answered some questions. It's really not that complicated. I just like use whatever I like. So feel free to modify this palette to be however you want to use it. Hopefully this was helpful and gives you some ideas on how to tailor your watercolor palette to be more interesting to you and helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Also, if you are interested, I do a ton of art supply stuff and sketchbook flip throughs and all of that good art content over on Patreon. Plus, you can get prints and sticker sheets mailed to you every month, which is really exciting. So check that out. If not, I'll see you in the next video.